Sāksim ar pirmo paneļdiskusiju. Emitenti, investīciju, piesaistītāji. Paneļdiskusijas mērķis ir redzēt, kāda pieredze ir bijusi gan lielākiem, kā arī mazākiem uzņēmumiem Baltijas reģionā, izmantojot gan regulēto, kā arī alternatīvo tirgu, kuram nosaukums ir First North. Aicināšu arī auditorijai piedalīties aptaujā, un tagad turpinot laiks iepazīties ar diskusijas līdzdalībniekiem. Mums ir Marko Raids, Tallinas ostas valdes loceklis, finanšu direktors, Eriks Hagstroms, Nektar padomes priekšsēdētājs, Uldis Iltners, MADARA Cosmetics valdes loceklis un Krišjānis Zariņš, CMDAF Baltijas MVU IPO Fonda projekta vadītājs. Un tagad, lai pārējiem būtu vienkāršāk, es pāriešu uz angļu valodu. So we'll go across now to English. And let's now watch a short video from Tallinas, which represents some personal experience in the capital markets via the IPO process.
Hello. On behalf of Port of Tallinn, I would like to welcome all the participants of the Latvian Capital Market Forum 2021. My name is Marko Raids. I'm the CFO for Port of Tallinn and also a board member. Port of Tallinn is a landlord port providing services to cargo operators and passenger operators, but not just only. We also run a domestic ferry service and operate an icebreaker Botnica. On 13th of June 2018, Port of Tallinn was listed on Tallinn Stock Exchange. The reasons for Estonian government to list Port of Tallinn were the following. First, to boost the development of local capital markets by providing a flagship company. Second, to create opportunities for investments for Estonian domestic pension funds who were heavily accumulating assets, but these were mostly invested abroad. Third, to provide investment opportunities for Estonian private individuals and attract also international investors into Estonian capital markets. Of course, with listing also becomes the goal of improving efficiency and transparency of the company and improving the corporate governance. We also had some measurable goals. We wanted at least 2 Estonian pension funds to invest during the IPO. We managed to attract 3. In addition to that, also 3 private investment Estonian investment funds invested in Port of Tallinn. We also had a goal to attract at least 6,000 retail investors. We managed actually to get investments by 14,000, which is 1% of Estonian population, quite significant. And the third goal was to increase the turnover of Tallinn Stock Exchange at least by 15% in the first 12 months. Port of Tallinn was 32% of Tallinn Stock Exchange turnover. So we managed to meet all the goals that were set by the Estonian government. Our experience on being on the stock market, of course, is good. What are the things that we have recognized as most important? First, I would say, is the quality of reporting. Once you have the external stakeholders looking at the company, the quality of financial reporting and explaining the events that take place and their impact on the company are more than ever important. Clarity of the messaging and the relevance is think, the key to success. Of course, this means that you need to think through what the reporting is, how it's compiled, and what it says, that it would be easy to understand and to the point. So from one hand, of course, it's increased quality. From second hand, it's more time spent for preparations. Also, what you get by listing is interested parties such as analysts who are, or other investors looking at your company, asking questions, reflecting back on their ideas about the future outcome, about the significance of events. So you get this two-way interaction, which is quite nice and interesting actually, giving a lot of insight into how things or how different people perceive what is happening. Of course, when you are listed, the company image will become more important. You need to take care of that. You need to look after it. Also, what we see is that there is increased focus on corporate social responsibility and all the green activities. So one needs to integrate this into the daily reporting and into the annual reporting to show what responsible actions the company is taking, how you are not just making economic returns, but also contribute to the society and look after things that are important to your stakeholders. Maybe one thing that we are a little bit sad about is that over the years that we have been listed now, the share of international investors who have invested into Port of Tallinn has a little bit decreased. We hope that an event such as the Latvian Capital Market Forum and the consequences of this will lead to additional companies being listed, which would mean that there is additional interest for the international investors to look at the Baltic markets, to look at all the three countries and follow our economics and how we are doing and invest in the companies. The more companies we have, the bigger they are, the better it is, and the greater is the outlook to attract also international investors into the Baltic markets. Thank you, and I wish you a great conference.
Okay, thank you for that. A couple of short comments, I think, to keep in mind from the video. It's immediately clear that nothing happens by itself. There's also no single instrument or tool which can be necessarily used in Latvian, brīnum noiņa nepalīdzēs. And thirdly, it takes time and planning. It's not something you can do overnight. So, we also have 2 questions running for the participants of the forum. So please use the app and we'll return and have a look at the results a little bit later on. So let's move on into the discussion stage. We have a couple of questions here already immediately, which are highly relevant here. I'll address the first one to Uldis and Erik initially. So, how do you rate Tallinas Sadam's IPO? Does the state's involvement in capital markets provide a boost to capital market growth, as well as the attraction of relatively smaller capital market participants as well? What would you say, please? Uldi?
Yeah, I would agree what Marko told in his presentation, that the more participants, the more companies will be listed, the better results will have each of the companies. And Our company, MADARA Cosmetics, was listed on the Nasdaq Riga First North in November 2017, and we have very good experience so far. We have achieved all goals we were planning. So I can only encourage also other companies, also smaller companies, to go public. Of course, it means it's quite a big change in the state of mind of the company's management. Of course, things like transparency, openness, honesty, responsibility are raised to a new level. But once you have switched to it, then you can experience all the advantages that stock exchange is giving.
Thank you. Erik?
Okay, I managed to unmute my microphone. First of all, thank you for inviting me and having me here on at this event, and I'm happy that people are interested to hear our experiences from smaller companies' point of view. As far as I understood your question, Ivars, I understand that you were asking for comments and experiences of from the capital market and out of the Tallinas Marko Raids comments point of view. And I think personally that adding more companies and adding companies like Tallinas builds up the trust, and I think that the functioning of the market is a question of trust, and that's a positive thing, and it takes time, but this is the consequence. Then if you look at out of our point of view, out of my company's point of view, Nektar's point of view, when we decided to issue shares, we were first of all seeking for independence more or less independence from the banking system, and be well capitalized and able to do things as we plan. This has been realized. This has also, our intention was also to create a tool for expansion and for developing the company. This has also been realized. Then we have side effects that many times are thought that they are only phrases, like putting the company on the screen, that we are present, we are noted, but this has been realized. Also the fact that we are also more attractive as an employer, this has been realized. And also what Marko mentioned, that being public, being observed, being audited, it gives a backbone to the company and helps us to put a good structure in reporting, the financial reporting, etc. Also external communication. So I can't say any negative things about having been listed. only the opposite. Then the downside or the problem, as I see, is that we have not enough companies, but on the market, especially on the First North where we are listed. But it takes time, and when you compare with other markets like Sweden, Finland, it was only a couple of years ago then there were a handful of companies in Finland, and same thing in Sweden. But this takes off in a matter of time, and I think that initiatives like this event and information to the public and to institutional investors is very much welcome.
Thank you, Erik. So a follow-up question for Marko. Has the public offering of the shares opened up new future perspectives and opportunities for companies, in your view, such as raising capital using debt securities instead of using traditional lending facilities? Has this kind of financial benefit been assessed? And why do you think it might be that companies in the Baltics do not use capital market options more frequently?
Thank you, Ivars. That's a good question. And the short answer is, of course, it opens up new opportunities. First of all, once you are listed, you already comply to the requirements of the stock market. So to issue bonds, for example, that would be listed is easier. You don't need to do any additional reporting. You already do as a stock listed entity. Maybe one thing to think about is that even though if you are a listed company, you still need to prepare a prospectus for bond listing. So if you compare, for example, bank financing to financing via bonds, that would mean it's still a little bit more or needs more effort than to sign a loan agreement. Otherwise, I think it's really a good option to have alternative ways of financing should bank financing for whatever reason not work. We have used this opportunity, but some 15 years ago or so, maybe 10 years. But currently we are not using bonds because still the banks are more flexible and otherwise I think the pricing is quite on the same level. But as I said, maybe one thing to think about is the documentation burden in terms of getting things going. But otherwise, yes, it does open up definitely new opportunities, and once you're listed, your company is more visible to potential investors and people willing to finance you as well.
Thank you, Marko. So to move on, a quick question for Uldis. So what actually encouraged you to participate in the capital markets? And was the information on the capital market sufficient at the initial stage of the participation decision process?
Yeah, thank you, Ivars. There were three main factors that motivated us to go public. First, rising capital without losing control of the company's management. Secondly, rising the company's reputation in Northern Europe. And thirdly, to enable our customers and other private investors who like MADARA Cosmetics story to deepen cooperation with the company by becoming shareholders. And I think we have achieved all these goals very successfully by going public. Of course, it requires quite heavy preparation. So I think for us it took around 1.5 years from the decision we made to go public until our successful IPO. So in between there are quite many things to do. So it takes time and requires, of course, also the management resources, and of course there are certain costs connected to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Uldis. So, Erik, what encouraged you actually to participate in the capital markets? And was information on the capital market sufficient during the initial stage of the participation decision process, please?
I think I already went into these topics and mentioned in the earlier that the reasons to go public and issue shares was to firstly to become more or less independent from the banking system and strengthen the capital structure. But also an important thing was to put the company on the screen and have this transparency and also attract people, potential employees, interesting people. So these are maybe the most important. But also an argument was that being listed, we have this opportunity to use instruments, shares, maybe other bond instruments that help us in future investments. So this is a short list.
Thank you. Let's quickly move across and have a look how the surveys are moving along. We have some good participation happening here. The first one is, I'll just translate from Latvian, what are the primary needs in order for SMEs to attract financing using the capital markets? Now we have around 82 responses so far, dominating with around 51%. It's basically stating that a greater private and institutional investor interest and, let's say, drive or strive for greater number of IPOs seems to be the dominating one. And then at around 24% each, we've got popularizing the idea about capital markets and having some sort of state-level support for partial coverage of IPO expenses. The other question, which we'll get onto in a moment with our panelists, is how do you evaluate the existing regulatory environment? And at the moment we have an overriding response from 95 participants, 58% indicating that the regulation is rather strict and broad. So it's actually introducing difficult to justify expenses as part of the process. 22% are indicating that the amount of regulation is adequate, and 19% indicating that it's not enough in order to let's say protect let's say savers or minority investors' rights. So moving back, and certainly then the next question will relate to the regulatory burden, and perhaps we can move to the largest company we have represented here, which is Tallinas. So for you, Marko, what is your assessment of the regulatory burden, which is actually the 10-point plan's fourth item, and whether this factor is one of the most important circumstances where you think this might be avoiding participation in these capital markets? Do you think it's an obstacle or not, please?
That's of course a good question. I think every regulation should be kept to as minimal and efficient as possible. But having said that, of course, the devil is always in the details. And I would say that being on the stock market is quite much easier than getting into the stock market. The IPO process itself, of course, that's quite heavily regulated. And if you get into international process such as we had, then the regulations that you need to follow are quite extensive. And that part, of course, could be much easier. And this could be one of the bottlenecks. Once you are listed, I think these regulations are quite reasonable and can be solved with company internal procedures and some key decisions what the company makes. But for us, of course, as I said, getting listed was a little bit more tricky in terms of regulations.
Okay, thank you. Uldi, a quick question relating to the regulatory burden. You're a good example of not being on the regulated market, but on First North. And so again, reflecting on the program's fourth item, is the regulatory burden for you something which in your view could be an issue? Has it been an obstacle for you, or do you think it might be an issue for other companies, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ivars. I think certainly it is a difficulty, and this was one of the reasons why MADARA Cosmetics, as a smaller company, choose the Nasdaq Riga First North alternative market. So since the management capacity in smaller companies are limited, so we need to be efficient dealing with all the regulations. Of course, especially for smaller companies, it is an issue. For example, in our company, so we do not have separate persons in our management that deal with stock exchange activities and regulations. It means that the management team need to split these activities and responsibilities, and of course it creates additional capacity. Yeah, so of course the IPO, as also Marko mentioned, so the IPO process is difficult, and there are a lot of regulations that we need to follow. After the IPO, the everyday life is somewhat easier, and yeah, and MADARA Cosmetics as a smaller company, so we actually use all the advantages of First North alternative market regulations, and so it allows us to be efficient.
Okay, thank you. Now, it's not a competition. However, Erik, I think you're representing not only First North today, I think you're also representing the smallest company in terms of number of employees, measurable in the teens as such. So I think then it's a highly relevant quick feedback question for you in terms of the assessment of the regulatory burden or the program's fourth item. Is this a factor which you think is avoiding certain companies to participate in capital markets, or has it not really been an obstacle for yourself, please?
First of all, I think that we are like MADARA Cosmetics small, and we are the smallest, as you said, but the burden itself, I don't see any problem in that. Of course, the process to get on the market, that was like going through a washing machine and turning up every bit and piece. But at the same time, we are working in the alcohol industry, and we are used to being audited and monitored from authorities and tax and customs authorities. So the day-to-day reporting and this routine burden today is not a problem. I think it's the opposite. It puts a backbone and a structure in the company.
Thank you. And another quick question for all three gentlemen, just in brief, perhaps reflecting on the program's 10th item. What are the issuers' feelings in terms of the involvement of investment services providers in the Baltic capital markets? Are they sufficiently active, or is there anything particular else that you would like to see, or is there a very broad range of services without necessarily being consistent? So perhaps first and foremost, I'll again ask Marko for some brief feedback there, please.
I think the key to develop the market still is, and it starts from demand. So no matter how good the service, if there is no demand, then the service itself does not save the market. So the question is there enough interested parties to offer the services to? And that starts from sufficient number of companies that investors would like to take interest in, and then also the services would follow by themselves. But at the moment, we don't see that there's any critical things missing in the market. So as much as we need, we have always managed to get what we want.
A very nice statement, Marko. Thank you. Uldi, perhaps briefly reflecting on the program's 10th item. So the issue is, or your feelings about the involvement of investment services providers in Baltic capital markets. Are they sufficiently active? Are they sufficiently broad? Or are they very specific? Any short insights there from you, please? And you can say what you like about me.
Yeah, so probably we do not have so much experience with investment service providers. I can say that we have a very good experience with LHV Bank. It's both during the IPO and also now when maintaining our activities on stock exchange. I don't know if this relates to this question, but what was perhaps a little surprising in our IPO that Latvian institutional investors, including pension funds, were not interested in investing in our company. And from Latvia, only the Invalda pension fund participated in our IPO, and it was interesting that among Estonian institutional investors' interest and also actually real activity was higher, and this could indicate certain distrust of Latvian institutional investors in Latvian companies and or the Latvian capital market. Yeah, this insight from my side.
Thank you. And Erik, any quick comment you'd like to add there in terms of the program's 10th item, issuers' feelings about the involvement of investment services providers in the Baltic capital markets, the depth or breadth or availability? Any brief comment you'd like to share there, please?
No, this is not a problem. We are happy with the services we have been provided with, and I don't see this as an issue.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So we've tackled the first 5 questions. We've had 3 listed issuers providing some important insights. Now we'll move across to Krišjānis Zariņš, who has been very patiently sitting and waiting for his turn. So the acronym CMDAF, and certainly, disclosure here, I'm involved in this project as well, but perhaps Krišjānis, you can introduce yourself in 1 or 2 sentences and then give us some insight what this is and how this may actually be helping issuers, not only future ones, but in theory companies very similar to perhaps like MADARA Cosmetics and Nektar.
Thank you, Ivars. Thanks for having me here. And very briefly about myself, I have a very narrow and specific background. I've spent my professional career of 15 years building risk capital funds for EU member state governments. And I participated in about 30 different funds in all 3 Baltic countries, Sweden, Greece, Romania, Poland, building everything starting from accelerator, seed, business angel, growth, private equity, and ending with private equity funds. Yeah, but this is my first IPO fund, so I'm very excited to be here. Then, in terms of sequence of panel members, I think you put us very well. In Baltics, our 3 current panel members represent a significant part of listings that have happened over last years. So if we would extend the panel, we would very quickly run out of members to invite. So the initiative I'm representing is meant to add 25 to 30 new emittents, issuers to this list. So our current guys don't have to participate in every panel on this subject and can devote more time to their actual business. That was a long way to introduce the activity. I'm going to tell a little bit about the Baltic SME IPO Fund. Is an initiative launched in 2019 at request of 3 Baltic governments aimed at fostering SME and mid-cap access to finance, at the same time facilitating development of Baltic capital markets. The current design stage of this initiative is funded by European Commission and implemented by European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and executed by our team of KPMG, Kilo Zulu, LHV and Evershed, with myself and Ivars, the moderator, being the co-project leads. The project initiative was requested, and the official beneficiaries of the project are the 3 Baltic ministries of finance, which shows a high-level government support to developing this capital market. And it was really pleasant seeing the results of that survey. which said that the biggest thing that market needs is more investors investing in this segment, targeting this segment, because that's exactly what our fund is intending to do, and together with attracting further investors to the segment. And our target is to conclude the current design phase with government funding decisions in first half of this year. So the Baltic SME IPO fund can be set up and start running in the second half of 2021. There's been a lot of government talk about developing capital markets, so hopefully finally some activity will start. The main investors in this fund are expected to be the Baltic governments, likely through their national promotional institutions, Altum, Credex, Invega. And we're also working very hard to attract the IFIs like EF, EBRD, also the EU SME IPO fund of fund initiatives launched by European Commission is a target. The initial size of the fund is targeted to be 60 to 100 million euros. This fund will invest in two types of situations. First, it will look at all listings happening in Baltics within its investment strategy range and invest up to 50% of each placement if the conditions will be deemed good. This means if MADARA or Nektar would come to the market now for the first time and the price was right, this fund would consider investing in them. The idea is to encourage the private companies currently out there and afraid to try listing due to fear of their not being interested in sort of dedicated investors. That is to encourage them by demonstrating the existence of dedicated investor specializing in this segment, basically Baltic small caps. And the fund would also play a role of cornerstone investor, early and publicly announcing the intent to invest, thus sending a quality stamp signal to the rest of the market and encouraging the buildup of the remaining 50% of necessary investor base. The fund is not required to invest exactly 50%. It can be also 25%. So we sort of hope that there will be oversubscriptions like in MADARA actual fundraising case, and our fund will be able to stay even at lower, but 50 is the maximum. And this quality stamp signal is very important because we've seen that in several examples in our Nordic neighborhood. For example, in programs that TESIS, the Finnish Industry Investments, is running with the IPO investment program. The second type of investment this new fund will be targeting will be pre-listing stage SMEs, companies which are not yet listing, but which are ready to target listing within the next 25 months. And again, idea is to target the MADARA 2 type companies, just the ones which still need some preparatory work and investment prior to the actual listing to be sort of good listing material. On top of money invested, the fund will also support the companies with transition from private to public company status, meaning improving corporate governance, financial reporting standards, investor communication, also any company-specific situations like maybe buying out some minority investor who is not so interested in sort of pursuing growth, which always entails some level of risk. And during its planned 5-year investment period, the fund is targeted to invest in 25 to 30 Baltic companies, which means 8 to 10 companies in each country. So this should create an unprecedented surge of new issuers in each Baltic country, including Latvia. Hope this sounds right.
Thank you very much. That's a very good summary. So a quick couple of questions for you. First of all, what role and support for issuers could be expected from the future Baltic SME IPO fund? What could be the main selection criteria, and will the importance of ESG, environmental social governance factors, be taken into consideration, please?
Very good questions. The fund will invest between 500,000 and 5 million per investee company, with 2 to 4 million being the sweet spot. Taking minority stakes in companies, importantly, our fund will never invest alone. There will be a requirement for parallel 50%, at least 50% co-investment from other investors to both as market validation, but also to increase the mass of total capital available. And the fund will only invest in companies that are either listing or targeting listing in a foreseeable future. It's important distinction from the other funds on the market that are out there. The specific activities supporting the transition from private to public company status, obviously. The main selection criteria, established profitable companies with reasonable growth prospects, and quite importantly, export sales or export sale prospects for a company to gain full benefit from stock listing. It's typically useful to be able to operate cross-border or have potential to operate cross-border. Equally importantly, the criteria will be whether company's owners, current owners' vision aligns with high standards necessary for the public company role and status. Because not every private company out there or private company owners out there are ready for what it takes to be a public company, which means full extent of corporate governance, transparency, treatment of minority investors, the social and environmental parts of ESG. So to sum up the criteria, it's basically ESG plus Q, with Q standing for quality asset at reasonable price. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Krišjānis. And the other question is, the 10-point program's third item mentions increasing passive investments into the Latvian capital market. Will the fund's focus will be on passive, implying long-term or short-term speculative investments, being, how should we say, maybe not overnight, but extremely short-term? And I mean, follow-up question relating to that then, why and how do these investment approaches differ in your view, please?
Thank you. Regarding this new fund, it's definitely long-term. The market needs solid long-term investors and solid long-term issuers. It's sort of chicken and egg problem, which explains why it hasn't happened previously. Especially difficult in this smaller company segment, which has always been difficult for large foreign investors, and where Baltic local investors must play a larger role. The Baltic SME IPO fund is meant to provide some of both, hopefully triggering a virtuous cycle where more emittents attract more investors, which in turn attract further issuers, emittents, which in turn attract further investors. I think in this Baltic small cap segment in general, as investing should be longer term versus a short term speculative approach. The liquidity and depth of the stock market will probably not be super deep for the small cap issuers, narrowing the short-term speculation opportunities, while the long-term is more driven by fundamentals, allowing opportunities for investor profit, like we saw, for example, in MADARA's case. And to sort of round this up, in the beginning of this panel, you mentioned the burvju nuiņa in Latvian as a sort of perfect solution for the capital market problems. And our fund may not be strictly burvju nuiņa equivalent, but I think it's as close to that as you can realistically achieve. And I didn't describe previously, but we did quite a long session of interviews with all different market participants, different sort of points of view, analyzed various case studies. And so the thing we put together is a very strong contender for the role of this burvju nuiņa. And if this thing runs well, it can actually turn out to be that burvju nuiņa. But we'll see 5 years, well, 3, 4, 5 years from now. I hope we will be able to gather again in similar forum and look back at what was achieved and not need to have necessary the MADARA and Linda here, because we'll have 30 or 20 different issuers to choose from. So that's me.
Thank you, Krišjānis. So just before we do go to a one or two questions from the audience and also provide a summary, on the back of what we've just heard from Krišjānis, and for those who are English speaking here, Bodvinoņa is more or less magic wand that everything gets quickly sorted out by a fairy or some other favorable character. Now, very quickly, we have two First North companies represented here today with both Uldis and Erik. Just really, as I said, one sentence, or it could even be one word, just a very quick summary on what you have heard. Does something like the CMDAF project make sense? And why or why not? So first, perhaps to Uldis, please.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and this fund will give to the companies some certainty that the IPO will be successful. I think this can be this is quite a big challenge for a company, and I believe that many companies are cautious and worried about whether the IPO will succeed, and of course this fund will give some certainty that the IPO will be successful.
Thank you, Uldis. Erik, from your perspective, you had a slightly different approach when you got listed. You used a private placement approach. However, what you've heard so far makes sense as a fund, or any other short comments, please?
Asking for one word, I would say yes. Perfect.
Nice and concise. Let's maybe move to a quick question from the participants of the forum. I think this is the most relevant one at the moment for this particular panel discussion. And the question here is, what would be the necessary minimal parameters, so revenue, capital, profitability for a company, so that it could successfully undertake an IPO on Nasdaq Riga? Now, again, without trying to be, sounding like I'm being biased against Marko, maybe less relevant for super large companies, but maybe towards the smaller end. And we'll perhaps start with Erik, since you answered the last question with a single word. What, Erik, would be, in your view, the smallest, or is there actually very much dependent on each case individually, and that the numbers as a minimum are less relevant? Also, of course, taking into account the regulatory costs.
I would say that there is no limit. It's depending on the business case and the story and the status of the potential investment to be made. So I think it's not true if you say that it needs to be 1 million, 10 million, or 15 million, or something in turnover, or anything like this. So you can't put the figure. That wouldn't be right.
Perfect. Thank you. Uldis, any short comment there in terms of what you would consider the absolute minimum in terms of revenue, profitability, capital, anything like that? And especially here, we're focusing, of course, on the alternative market or First North, please.
Yeah, I would rather agree with Erik that probably this parameters are not that important. I think more important is that the business is stable, and that there is a growth potential. I think this is more important than the size. Of course, it's also good that there is a certain history for the company, so that the company is, say, I don't know, at least 3 years on the market, already successfully working. So, yeah, I think it's the different sizes can also smaller companies can do it successfully.
Perfect. Thank you, Uldi. So, quick summary then of what we've heard. We've heard that both large companies, very large companies in the form of Tallinas Sadam, Port of Tallinn, can be listed via IPO. Much smaller companies can also be listed via IPO, such as MADARA Cosmetics, private placements, which are another way of doing it. There's no absolute minimal formula per se. And it's actually quite open. We've heard that there's certainly then some important steps being taken in the form of the CMDAF project in order to assist a lot of these smaller companies, how to get moving and how to have things happening for them sooner. And we'll just have to be a little bit patient for that to come through. So, very importantly, I really wish to thank sincerely all of our first panel participants for their contributed time. In Marko's case, a fantastic video summarizing the situation. I do remind everyone that these videos will be available on the FCMC homepage. And now I will quickly switch back into Latvian. And tātad mums tagad būs pārtraukums uz 10 minūtēm, tātad 11:40 tiekamies šeit patās, un tad varēsim turpināt nākamo paneļdiskusiju. Paldies jums!